A powerful businessman evicts a seriously ill elderly woman, but what happens next will leave you speechless. You may think this is just another story of injustice, but the truth will turn everything upside down. In the glittering metropolis of Los Angeles, where dreams are born and shattered with equal frequency, lived a man who seemed to have it all. Gregory Cole, a name that echoed through the halls of power and wealth, was a billionaire real estate mogul whose very footsteps seemed to turn the earth to gold. Yet, as he stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows of his penthouse office, gazing out at the city that lay sprawled before him like a glittering offering, Gregory felt nothing but a vast, echoing emptiness. 52 stories below, the streets pulsed with life, a rhythm Gregory had long since forgotten how to dance to. He watched the tiny figures of people scurrying about their days, each one a mystery, each one with a story he would never know. How long had it been since he'd walked among them, felt the press of a crowd, or exchanged a genuine smile with a stranger? He couldn't remember. Gregory's assistant, Julia, knocked softly on the doorframe, interrupting his reverie. "Mr. Cole, the board is ready for you." He turned, his face a mask of practiced indifference. "Thank you, Julia. I'll be right there." As Gregory followed Julia to the boardroom, he couldn't shake the feeling that something was missing. It wasn't a new sensation. It had been his constant companion for years now, but today it seemed to gnaw at him with particular ferocity. The boardroom was a temple to modern opulence, all gleaming glass and polished wood. Around the table sat men and women in impeccable suits, their faces a mixture of anticipation and barely concealed greed. Gregory took his seat at the head of the table, feeling the weight of their expectations settle on his shoulders like a familiar if unwelcome cloak. If you're enjoying this video, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and activate the bell so you don't miss any new content. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, his voice smooth and controlled. "Today we're here to discuss our latest acquisition. As you know, we've recently purchased an old apartment building in the eastern part of the city. It's prime real estate, ripe for development." A murmur of approval rippled through the room. Gregory continued. "However, there's a small issue. The building is currently occupied, mostly by long-term tenants. Many of them are elderly or on fixed incomes." One of the board members, a sharp-faced woman named Veronica, leaned forward. "And? We've dealt with this before, Gregory. It's simple enough to evict them." Gregory nodded, ignoring the twinge of discomfort her words provoked. "Of course. I've already set the wheels in motion. They'll all be out within 2 weeks." The rest of the meeting passed in a blur of profit projections and development plans. As the board members filed out, congratulating themselves on another lucrative deal, Julia lingered behind. "Mr. Cole," she said hesitantly, "about the evictions." Gregory raised an eyebrow. "Yes?" Julia took a deep breath. "It's just, some of these people have lived there for decades. There's one woman, Eleanor Thompson. She's been there for over 30 years. She's elderly and not in the best health. I'm worried about what this might do to her." For a moment something flickered in Gregory's eyes, a spark of empathy perhaps. But it was gone as quickly as it appeared. "It's unfortunate, Julia, but it's business. We can't let sentimentality get in the way of progress." Julia nodded, her face a mask of professional neutrality, but Gregory could see the disappointment in her eyes. As she turned to leave, he found himself calling out to her. "Julia?" She paused at the door. "Yes, Mr. Cole?" Gregory hesitated, then shook his head. "Never mind. That will be all." As the door closed behind her, Gregory sank into his chair, suddenly feeling every one of his 55 years. When had he become this person? When had the world become so simple, so black and white? Profit or loss, success or failure, with no room for the messy gray areas of human emotion. He reached for the stack of mail on his desk, hoping for a distraction. Most of it was the usual: invitations to galas, investment opportunities, charitable organizations seeking donations. But one envelope caught his eye. It was plain, almost shabby compared to the others, with handwriting that looked shaky and uncertain. Gregory tore it open, his curiosity piqued. As he read, his face paled. "Dear Mr. Cole, you don't know me, but I knew your mother. We were the closest of friends once upon a time. I've been trying to reach out to her for years, but my letters always came back unopened. It was only recently that I learned of her passing. I'm writing to you now because I have nowhere else to turn. I live in one of the buildings your company has just purchased, and I've received an eviction notice. Mr. Cole, I'm old and sick. This apartment has been my home for over 30 years. I don't have anywhere else to go. I know it's a lot to ask, but for the sake of your mother's memory, would you consider letting me stay, even just a little longer? Sincerely, Eleanor Thompson. Gregory read the letter once, twice, 3 times. His mother. It had been so long since he'd allowed himself to think about her. The pain of her loss, even after all these years, was still a raw wound. He buzzed for Julia. When she appeared, he held out the letter. Find out everything you can about this Eleanor Thompson, and postpone the evictions, just for now. Julia's eyes widened in surprise, but she simply nodded and took the letter. As the day wore on, Gregory found himself unable to focus on work. His mind kept drifting back to the letter, to Eleanor Thompson, to his mother. By the time evening fell, he had made a decision. The next morning found Gregory in a part of the city he hadn't visited in years. The streets were narrower here, the buildings older and more worn. As he stepped out of his sleek black car, he could feel the eyes of the residents on him, curious and wary. The apartment building loomed before him, a relic of a bygone era. Gregory took a deep breath and entered. The lobby was dimly lit and smelled faintly of mildew. An ancient elevator creaked and groaned as it carried him to the 3rd floor. As he stepped out, he heard the murmur of voices and the shuffle of feet. Word of his arrival had clearly spread. Apartment 3B. Gregory stood before the door, his hand raised to knock. For a moment he hesitated. Then, squaring his shoulders, he rapped firmly on the worn wood. The door opened slowly, revealing a small, frail-looking woman with silver hair and kind eyes. Those eyes widened in surprise as they took in Gregory's expensive suit and polished shoes. "Mr. Cole," she asked, her voice quavering slightly. Gregory nodded. "Mrs. Thompson, may I come in?" Eleanor stepped back, gesturing for him to enter. The apartment was small but tidy, filled with the accumulated treasures of a long life. Photos covered every available surface, and the air was heavy with the scent of lavender. "I got your letter," Gregory said, feeling suddenly awkward. You knew my mother?" Eleanor's face softened. "Oh, yes. Margaret and I were the best of friends. We met when we were just girls, you know, fresh out of school and ready to take on the world." As Eleanor spoke, sharing stories of a woman Gregory had never truly known, he found himself sinking onto the worn sofa. For hours they talked. Eleanor told him of his mother's dreams, her fears, her triumphs and failures. With each word, the image Gregory had held of his mother, distant, cold, always just out of reach, began to crumble. "She loved you so much," Eleanor said softly. "She was so proud of you." Gregory felt something inside him break. "Then why did she leave?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Eleanor reached out, her papery hand covering his. "Oh, my dear, she never left you. Not really. Life is complicated. Sometimes we make choices we regret, but can't find a way to undo." As the sun began to set, painting the small apartment in shades of gold and amber, Gregory stood to leave. At the door, he turned back to Eleanor. "Mrs. Thompson, Eleanor, I want you to know that you don't have to worry about the eviction. This is your home. It will remain your home for as long as you want it." Eleanor's eyes filled with tears. "Thank you," she whispered. As Gregory walked back to his car, he felt lighter than he had in years. Something had shifted inside him, a piece falling into place that he hadn't even known was missing. Over the next few weeks, Gregory found himself visiting Eleanor regularly. Each visit peeled back another layer of the man he had become, revealing the person he used to be, the person he could be again. It was during one of these visits that Gregory made a decision that would change not just his life, but the lives of countless others, but to make a difference. The reaction was immediate and intense. Some board members were outraged, others intrigued. Arguments broke out across the table. Through it all, Gregory stood firm. "I understand your concerns," he said, his voice cutting through the chaos. "But I believe this is not just the right thing to do morally, it's the right thing to do for our company. We have an opportunity here to be leaders, to show that business can be a force for good in the world." In the end, not everyone was convinced. Some investors pulled out, unwilling to risk their profits on what they saw as a foolhardy venture. But others, inspired by Gregory's vision, doubled down on their commitment. As the weeks turned into months, Gregory threw himself into his new mission with a passion he hadn't felt in years. He worked tirelessly, often late into the night, poring over plans and proposals. Julia, his assistant, found herself promoted to project manager, her natural empathy and organizational skills proving invaluable in navigating the complex waters of community development. The transformation of the old apartment building became a symbol of hope for the neighborhood. As word spread of what Gregory was doing, other businesses began to take notice. Some, inspired by his example, started their own community initiatives. Others, seeing the positive press Gregory was receiving, sought to partner with him. But it wasn't all smooth sailing. There were setbacks and challenges. Some residents, wary of change, resisted the new developments. Others worried that the improvements would lead to gentrification, pricing out the very people Gregory was trying to help. Through it all, Gregory found himself turning to Eleanor for advice and support. Her wisdom, born of a lifetime of experiences both good and bad, helped him navigate the complexities of community building. One evening, as they sat on Eleanor's small balcony watching the sunset, she turned to him with a twinkle in her eye. "You know, Gregory," she said, "your mother would be so proud of you." Gregory felt a lump form in his throat. "Do you really think so?" Eleanor nodded. "I know so. She always believed that you were destined for great things. But I think even she couldn't have imagined this." As the project progressed, Gregory found himself changing in ways he never expected. The cold, calculating businessman began to thaw, replaced by a man who genuinely cared about the people around him. He learned the names of his employees, from the executives in the boardroom to the janitors who cleaned the offices at night. He listened to their stories, their dreams, their fears. And in doing so, he began to rediscover his own humanity. The day the renovated apartment building was officially reopened was one of the proudest of Gregory's life. As he stood before the gathered crowd, residents, community leaders, media, he felt a sense of accomplishment, unlike anything he'd experienced before. "This building," he said, his voice ringing out clear and strong, "is more than just bricks and mortar. It's a symbol of what we can achieve when we come together, when we remember that we're all part of the same community. It's a promise that no one will be left behind, that everyone deserves a chance to thrive." As the crowd cheered, Gregory caught sight of Eleanor in the front row, tears streaming down her face. In that moment, he knew that he had found his true calling. But Gregory's journey was far from over. As news of his transformation spread, he found himself besieged by requests for interviews, speaking engagements, even book deals. At first he was reluctant, preferring to work behind the scenes. But Eleanor convinced him that by sharing his story, he could inspire others to make a difference. "Your voice has power, Gregory," she told him. "Use it." And so he did. Gregory began to speak out on issues of social justice and corporate responsibility. He used his influence to lobby for changes in housing policy, pushing for more affordable housing and protections for tenants. His former business associates watched in amazement as the man they had once known as a ruthless tycoon became a vocal advocate for the underprivileged. Some scoffed, calling it a midlife crisis or a publicity stunt. But as time went on and Gregory's commitment never wavered, even his harshest critics had to admit that his transformation was genuine. As Gregory's new ventures flourished, he found himself facing an unexpected challenge: forgiveness. Not from others, but from himself. The weight of his past actions, the people he had hurt in his relentless pursuit of wealth, began to weigh heavily on him. It was Eleanor who helped him find his way through this dark night of the soul. "Gregory," she said gently, "we all make mistakes. The measure of a person isn't in never falling, but in how they rise after they've fallen. Inspired by her words, Gregory began to reach out to those he had wronged in the past. Some refused to see him, the wounds still too raw. Others, seeing the change in him, were willing to listen. It wasn't easy, and there were times when Gregory wanted to give up, to retreat back into his old life of isolation and indifference. But each small act of reconciliation, but the connections between people, the strength of a community united. As the party wound down, Eleanor pulled Gregory aside. "I have something for you," she said, pressing a small, worn book into his hands. Gregory looked down at it curiously. It was a diary, the cover faded and cracked with age. "It was your mother's," Eleanor explained softly. "She gave it to me to keep safe years ago. I think it's time you had it." With trembling hands, Gregory opened the diary. Inside, in his mother's familiar handwriting, were pages upon pages of thoughts, dreams, and regrets. As he read, Gregory felt the last pieces of the puzzle of his past falling into place. His mother's words painted a picture of a complex woman, one who had struggled with her own demons and made difficult choices. She wrote of her love for Gregory, her pride in his accomplishments, and her deep regret at the distance that had grown between them. As he turned the pages, Gregory's vision blurred with tears. He read about his mother's battle with depression, her fear that she wasn't a good enough parent, and her decision to step back, believing that Gregory would be better off without her influence. "It was a decision," she wrote, "that haunted her every day." "Oh, Mom," Gregory whispered, his heart aching for the woman he had never truly known. Eleanor placed a comforting hand on his shoulder. "She loved you more than anything in this world, Gregory. She just didn't always know how to show it." In that moment, surrounded by the warmth of the community he had helped build and holding the last gift from his mother, Gregory felt a sense of peace wash over him. The anger and resentment he had carried for so long began to dissolve, replaced by understanding and forgiveness. As the weeks passed, Gregory found himself returning to the diary again and again. Each reading revealed new insights, not just about his mother, but about himself. He began to see how his own actions, his relentless pursuit of success at any cost, had been shaped by his feelings of abandonment and his desire to prove himself. Inspired by his mother's words and Eleanor's unwavering support, Gregory decided to take his mission one step further. He announced the creation of a new program within his foundation, focused on mental health support for families in underserved communities. "No one should have to face their struggles alone," he said at the press conference announcing the initiative. "And no child should grow up feeling unloved or unwanted." The program was an immediate success, providing counseling, support groups, and education to thousands of families. Gregory took a personal interest in its development, often visiting the centers and talking with the families who benefited from the services. One day, as he was leaving one of the centers, a young woman approached him. Her eyes were red from crying, but there was a spark of hope in them that Gregory recognized all too well. "Mr. Cole," she said, her voice trembling slightly, "I just wanted to thank you. This program, it saved my family. I was so close to giving up, to walking away from my kids because I thought they'd be better off without me. But now I understand that's not true. I'm getting the help I need, and for the first time in years, I feel like there's hope." Gregory felt a lump form in his throat. He thought of his mother, of the struggle she must have faced, and wished that she had had access to support like this. "You're very welcome," he said softly, taking the woman's hand in both of his. "Remember, you're not alone. We're all in this together." As he drove home that evening, Gregory's mind was awash with memories and emotions. He thought about the long journey that had brought him to this point, from the cold, calculating businessman he had once been to the man he was now. He thought about Eleanor, whose friendship had been the catalyst for his transformation. About Julia, who had stood by him through every challenge and had become not just a valued employee, but a true friend. About the countless lives that had been touched and changed by the work of his foundation. And he thought about his mother. For the first time in years, the thought of her brought not pain or anger, but a bittersweet mixture of love and understanding. As he pulled up to his home, no longer the vast, empty mansion he had once inhabited, but a modest house in the heart of the community he served, Gregory felt a sense of contentment wash over him. He wasn't the same man he had been all those years ago when he had coldly ordered the eviction of Eleanor and her neighbors. That man was gone, transformed by compassion, understanding, and the power of human connection. Gregory stepped out of his car and looked up at the night sky. The stars seemed brighter somehow, as if they too were celebrating the journey he had undertaken. He took a deep breath, savoring the cool night air and the distant sounds of the city. His city, a place he was helping to make better one day at a time. As he walked towards his front door, Gregory made a silent promise to himself, to Eleanor, to his mother's memory, and to all the people whose lives he touched. He promised to never forget the lessons he had learned, to always strive to be a force for good in the world, and to remember that true wealth lay not in money or possessions, but in the connections we make and the lives we touch. With a smile on his face and purpose in his heart, Gregory Cole stepped into his home, ready to face whatever challenges tomorrow might bring, for he knew now that he was not alone. He was part of something larger than himself, a community, a family, bound together by love, compassion, and the shared belief that everyone deserves a chance to thrive. As he closed the door behind him, the stars twinkled overhead, bearing silent witness to the remarkable transformation of a man who had once been lost, but had found his way home. The next morning, Gregory woke early, his mind already buzzing with ideas for new projects and initiatives. As he sipped his morning coffee on the porch, watching the neighborhood come to life around him, he couldn't help but marvel at how different his life had become. Just a few years ago, he would have been in his office before dawn, poring over spreadsheets and financial reports, his sole focus on increasing profits and expanding his empire. Now, he found joy in the simple act of greeting his neighbors as they passed by, in hearing about their lives and their dreams. As he finished his coffee, Gregory's phone buzzed with a message from Julia. There was a situation at one of the community centers that required his attention. Without hesitation, he grabbed his keys and headed out, ready to face whatever challenge awaited him. The community center was bustling with activity when Gregory arrived. Children laughed and played in the daycare area, while in another room a job training seminar was in full swing. Julia met him at the door, her face creased with concern. "What's the problem?" Gregory asked as they walked briskly down the hallway. Julia sighed. "It's the new youth program. We're having trouble getting it off the ground. The kids just aren't engaging with it." Gregory nodded thoughtfully. This was a project he had been particularly excited about, a program designed to provide mentorship and educational support to at-risk youth in the community. They had poured countless hours and resources into its development, but if the kids weren't interested, all of that would be for nothing. "Let's talk to them," Gregory said. "Find out what they want, what they need. We can't help them if we don't understand them." For the next few hours, Gregory and Julia sat with groups of teenagers listening to their stories, their frustrations, their hopes and fears. What emerged was a picture very different from what they had imagined when designing the program. These kids didn't need another set of classes or structured activities. What they craved was a safe space to be themselves, opportunities to explore their interests and talents, and adults who would listen without judgment. As the last group filed out, Gregory turned to Julia with a determined glint in his eye. "We need to start over," he said. "Scrap the current program and build something new, something that truly serves these kids." Julia nodded, already pulling out her tablet to take notes. "What are you thinking?" "A creative arts center," Gregory said, his excitement growing as the idea took shape. "With studios for music, art, dance, writing, whatever these kids are passionate about. We'll bring in mentors from the community, local artists, musicians, writers. Give these kids a chance to express themselves, to discover their talents." Julia's face lit up. "That's brilliant, Gregory. But it's going to take a lot of work and money to make it happen." Gregory smiled. "Then we'd better get started." Over the next few months, Gregory threw himself into the project with a passion that surprised even him. He reached out to his contacts in the art world, convincing famous musicians, artists, and writers to donate their time as mentors. He worked with architects to redesign the community center, transforming sterile classrooms into vibrant, inspiring creative spaces. There were setbacks, of course. Some board members balked at the cost. Others questioned whether this was the best use of resources. But Gregory stood firm, buoyed by the excitement he saw in the eyes of the young people who would benefit from the program. Finally, after what seemed like endless work and preparation, the day of the grand opening arrived. As Gregory stood on the stage looking out at the sea of faces, kids, parents, community leaders, artists, he felt a sense of anticipation unlike anything he'd experienced in his business career. "Today," he began, his voice ringing out clear and strong, "we're not just opening a building. We're opening doors. Doors to creativity, to self-expression, to futures filled with possibility. This center belongs to all of you. It's a place where dreams can take root and grow, where talent can be nurtured, where voices that have too often been silenced can finally be heard." As he spoke, Gregory caught sight of Eleanor in the front row, her eyes shining with pride. Beside her sat Julia, beaming with the satisfaction of a job well done. And there, in the back of the room, he saw the young woman he had met outside the mental health center months ago, her arm around a teenage boy who was practically vibrating with excitement. In that moment, Gregory felt a surge of emotion so powerful it nearly took his breath away. This was why he had worked so hard, why he had transformed his life and his business. Not for accolades or for profit, but for this, for the chance to make a real, tangible difference in people's lives. As the ribbon was cut and the doors of the new Creative Arts Center swung open, Gregory found himself swept up in a tide of excited young people, all eager to explore their new domain. He watched as kids gravitated towards different areas, some heading straight for the music studios, others for the art rooms or the computer lab. In the weeks and months that followed, the Creative Arts Center became a hub of activity in the community. Kids who had once been labeled as troublemakers or underachievers blossomed under the guidance of their mentors, discovering talents they never knew they had. Gregory made it a point to visit regularly, not as the wealthy benefactor, but as a friend and supporter. He sat in on music sessions, admired artwork, listened to poetry readings, and with each visit, he felt his own creative spirit, long dormant, beginning to stir. One afternoon, as he was leaving the center, he ran into Eleanor. She was moving slower these days, leaning heavily on her cane, but her eyes were as bright and sharp as ever. "Gregory," she said, taking his arm, "I want you to know how proud I am of you. Your mother, she would be over the moon if she could see you now." Gregory felt a familiar tightness in his throat. "I hope so, Eleanor, I really do." Eleanor patted his arm. "I know so. You've become the man she always knew you could be, and more than that, you've become the man you were always meant to be." As they stood there, watching the sun set over the neighborhood they both loved, Gregory reflected on the long, winding path that had brought him to this moment. From the cold, ruthless businessman he had once been, to the man he was now, a man who had found his purpose, his community, his home. He thought about all the lives that had been changed, not just the kids at the Creative Arts Center, but the families helped by the mental health program, the elderly residents who now had safe, affordable housing, the countless others who had benefited from the work of his foundation. And he thought about how his own life had been transformed, how he had found a sense of fulfillment and joy that all his wealth and success had never been able to provide. As if reading his thoughts, Eleanor squeezed his arm gently. "You know, Gregory," she said, her voice soft with wisdom, "life has a funny way of bringing us exactly where we need to be, even if we don't realize it at the time. All those years ago, when you came to evict me, who could have imagined we'd end up here?" Gregory chuckled softly. "Certainly not me. I was so lost back then, Eleanor, so empty. I thought I had everything, but really I had nothing that truly mattered." Eleanor nodded. "And now?" Gregory looked out at the community center, at the kids streaming out, laughing and talking excitedly about their projects. He thought about the sense of purpose that now filled his days, the connections he had formed, the love he had found, not just for others, but for himself. "Now," he said, a smile spreading across his face, "I have everything." As they turned to walk back towards Eleanor's apartment, Gregory felt a sense of peace settle over him. He knew there would be more challenges ahead, more work to be done. But he also knew that he was exactly where he was meant to be, doing exactly what he was meant to do. And as the stars began to twinkle in the twilight sky, Gregory Cole, once a man driven by greed and ambition, now a man guided by compassion and purpose, walked arm in arm with the woman who had changed his life, towards a future bright with possibility and rich with the true wealth of human connection. The story of Gregory Cole, from ruthless tycoon to community pillar, spread far beyond the borders of Los Angeles. It became a beacon of hope, a testament to the power of transformation and the impact one person can have when they choose to use their resources for the greater good. As the years passed, Gregory's foundation expanded its reach, establishing similar programs in cities across the country. The Creative Arts Center model was replicated, bringing opportunities for self-expression and growth to young people in underserved communities nationwide. But even as his influence grew, Gregory never lost sight of where it all began, in that small apartment building where he had first met Eleanor. He made sure to stay connected to his local community, to remain accessible and involved in the day-to-day workings of the programs he had established. One crisp autumn morning, as Gregory walked through the neighborhood park he had helped create, he noticed a young man sitting on a bench, hunched over a sketchpad. Something about the intensity of the young artist's focus caught Gregory's attention. As he approached, the young man looked up, his eyes widening in recognition. "Mr. Cole, I didn't see you there." Gregory smiled warmly. "Please, don't let me interrupt, may I?" He gestured to the empty space on the bench. The young man nodded, moving over to make room. "Of course, sir." As Gregory sat down, he caught a glimpse of the sketch, a beautifully detailed drawing of the park, capturing not just the physical elements, but somehow the very spirit of the place. "This is extraordinary," Gregory said, genuinely impressed. "You have a real talent." The young man blushed, ducking his head modestly. "Thank you, sir. I actually learned to draw at your art center. I never thought I had any artistic ability before that." Gregory felt a surge of pride and joy. "What's your name, young man?" "Michael, sir. Michael Thompson." Gregory's eyebrows shot up in surprise. "Thompson? You wouldn't happen to be related to Eleanor Thompson, would you?" Michael's face lit up. "She's my great-aunt." "Wait, do you know her?" Gregory laughed, a deep, hearty sound that echoed through the park. "Oh, I know her all right. Your great-aunt Eleanor is the reason I'm sitting here today. She changed my life." Over the next hour, Gregory shared the story of his transformation with Michael, watching as the young man's eyes grew wide with wonder. As he spoke, Gregory felt a sense of coming full circle, of passing on the legacy that Eleanor had entrusted to him. "You know, Michael," Gregory said as he finished his tale, "your aunt once told me that life has a way of bringing us exactly where we need to be. I believe that more than ever now, and I think you being here, creating this beautiful art, is proof of that." Michael nodded, his eyes shining with a mixture of gratitude and determination. "I want to make a difference too, Mr. Cole. I want to use my art to help people, the way you've used your resources to help our community." Gregory felt a warmth spread through his chest. "I have no doubt you will, Michael. And I'll tell you what, why don't you come by my office next week? I think we might be able to find a way to make that happen sooner rather than later." As they parted ways, Gregory watched Michael walk away, his stride purposeful and confident. He couldn't help but think about how different things might have been if he had gone through with that eviction all those years ago. How many lives would have been changed for the worse? How many stories like Michael's would never have been written? The thought filled him with a renewed sense of purpose. There was still so much work to be done, so many lives to touch, so many communities to uplift. But as he looked around at the thriving neighborhood he had helped create, Gregory knew that anything was possible when people came together with open hearts and a shared vision for a better world. As he turned to head home, Gregory's phone buzzed with a message. It was from Julia, letting him know that the board was waiting for him to start the meeting about their next big project, a nationwide initiative to combat homelessness. With a smile on his face and a spring in his step, Gregory headed towards his office. The crisp autumn air filled his lungs, invigorating him for the day ahead. As he walked, he couldn't help but reflect on how much had changed since that fateful day when he'd first met Eleanor. The streets he now traversed were a far cry from the rundown neighborhood he'd once sought to develop for profit. Trees lined the sidewalks, their leaves a vibrant tapestry of reds and golds. Small businesses thrived, their windows displaying wares from local artisans. Children laughed as they made their way to school, their backpacks adorned with patches from various programs his foundation had implemented. Gregory nodded and smiled at the people he passed, many of whom greeted him by name. He was no longer the unapproachable tycoon, but a familiar face, a neighbor, a friend. This connection to the community, he realized, was the true measure of his success. As he approached the office building that housed his foundation, Gregory paused for a moment to take it all in. The structure itself was a testament to the change he'd undergone. Once, he would have insisted on a towering skyscraper, all glass and steel, a monument to his own ego. Now the building before him was modest yet elegant, designed to blend seamlessly with the surrounding architecture. Solar panels glinted on the roof, and a small garden bloomed in front, tended by volunteers from the community. Inside, the lobby bustled with activity. Gregory greeted the security guard by name, asking after his daughter who had recently started college, the first in her family to do so, thanks to a scholarship from the foundation. As he made his way to the elevator, he overheard snippets of conversation about ongoing projects, a new health clinic opening in a neighboring town, a mentorship program for young entrepreneurs, plans for green spaces in urban areas. The elevator dinged, and Gregory stepped out onto the floor where the board meeting was to take place. Julia was waiting for him, tablet in hand, her face alight with the excitement that always preceded a new project. "Good morning, Gregory," she said, falling into step beside him. "I've got the latest numbers on the homelessness initiative. The pilot program in Chicago has shown some really promising results." Gregory nodded, his mind already racing with possibilities. "That's fantastic news, Julia. I can't wait to hear the details. Have you thought about how we might scale this to other cities?" As they entered the boardroom, the chatter of conversation died down. The faces that turned to greet Gregory were a diverse group: community leaders, experts in urban planning and social work, former recipients of the foundation's aid who now served as advisors. This, Gregory thought with pride, was how decisions should be made, not by a small group of wealthy elites, but by a coalition of those with first-hand knowledge and experience. "Good morning, everyone," Gregory said, taking his seat at the head of the table. "Before we dive into the homelessness initiative, I want to share a story with you all." He recounted his encounter with Michael in the park, watching as smiles spread across the faces of those gathered. By the time he finished, there wasn't a dry eye in the room. "That right there is why we do what we do," Gregory said, his voice thick with emotion. "It's not about the numbers, though those are important. It's not about recognition or accolades. It's about changing lives, one person at a time. It's about creating a ripple effect of positive change that can transform entire communities." He paused, looking around the room at the dedicated individuals who had chosen to join him on this journey. "Now, let's talk about how we can bring that same kind of transformation to those who are struggling with homelessness. Because everyone deserves a chance to thrive, to create, to contribute to their community. Everyone deserves a place to call home." As the meeting began in earnest, Gregory felt a familiar surge of energy. This was where he belonged, doing work that mattered, surrounded by people who shared his vision for a better world. The ruthless businessman he had once been seemed like a distant memory, a cautionary tale of the emptiness of wealth without purpose. Hours flew by as they pored over data, debated strategies, and hammered out the details of the new initiative. It was challenging work, but Gregory relished every moment of it. This, he knew, was his true calling. As the meeting drew to a close, Julia approached Gregory with a gentle reminder. "Don't forget, you're due at the community center in an hour. The kids from the art program are unveiling their mural today." Gregory's face lit up. He'd been looking forward to this all week. "Thanks, Julia. I wouldn't miss it for the world." As he gathered his things, Gregory's phone buzzed with a text message. It was from Eleanor. Don't work too hard, dear. Remember to take time to smell the roses, or in your case, admire the art. See you at the unveiling. Gregory chuckled, shaking his head fondly. Even at 95, Eleanor was still looking out for him, still reminding him of the importance of balance in life. As he left the office, Gregory felt a profound sense of gratitude wash over him. Gratitude for Eleanor, whose wisdom and kindness had set him on this path. Gratitude for the community that had embraced him and given him a second chance. Gratitude for the opportunity to make a difference in the world. The autumn sun was warm on his face as he stepped out onto the street, heading towards the community center. Gregory Cole, once a man who measured his worth in dollars and cents, now walked with the quiet confidence of someone who knew his true value lay in the lives he touched and the positive change he inspired. As he walked, Gregory's mind drifted to the future. There was still so much to be done, so many challenges to overcome. But he was no longer daunted by the magnitude of the task ahead. Instead, he felt invigorated, inspired by the potential for positive change. He thought about the homelessness initiative they had just discussed. It wasn't just about providing shelter. It was about restoring dignity, offering opportunities, and rebuilding lives. He envisioned a future where everyone had a safe place to call home, where communities came together to support their most vulnerable members. Gregory's pace quickened as he approached the community center. The sound of excited chatter and laughter reached his ears before he even turned the corner. As he came into view of the building, he saw a crowd gathered outside, a rainbow of faces, young and old, all buzzing with anticipation. The mural that was about to be unveiled had been a labor of love for the young artists of the community. For months they had worked tirelessly, pouring their hearts and souls into this massive artwork that would soon adorn the entire side of the community center. As Gregory made his way through the crowd, he was met with warm greetings and friendly pats on the back. He spotted Eleanor near the front, seated in a comfortable chair that had been specially brought out for her. Her eyes twinkled as she saw him approach. "There you are, my dear," she said, reaching out to clasp his hand. "I was beginning to think you'd get so caught up in your meeting, you'd forget all about us common folk." Gregory laughed, bending down to kiss her cheek. "As if you'd ever let me forget, Eleanor. Besides, I wouldn't miss this for the world." Just then, a hush fell over the crowd as Michael, the young artist Gregory had met in the park, stepped forward. Gregory felt a surge of pride as he watched the young man address the gathering, his voice clear and confident. "Ladies and gentlemen," Michael began, "what you're about to see is more than just a mural. It's a testament to the power of community, to the transformative nature of art, and to the belief that every one of us has the potential to create something beautiful." With a nod to his fellow artists, Michael grasped the edge of the enormous tarp covering the mural. "Without further ado, we present to you the heart of our community." As the tarp fell away, a collective gasp rose from the crowd, followed by thunderous applause. The mural was breathtaking, a vibrant, sweeping panorama that captured the essence of their community in all its diverse glory. It depicted scenes of daily life, children playing in the park, elders sharing stories on front porches, people of all ages working together in community gardens. But interwoven with these familiar scenes were elements of fantasy and imagination: soaring dragons, blooming flowers as tall as buildings, stars that seemed to twinkle and dance. At the center of it all was a giant heart, formed by hundreds of interlocking hands of all colors and sizes. And there, nestled within the heart, was a small but unmistakable portrait of Eleanor, her kind eyes seeming to watch over the entire scene. Gregory felt tears welling up in his eyes as he took in the magnificent artwork. This, he realized, was the true legacy of his work, not the buildings he had constructed or the programs he had implemented, but the spirit of community and creativity he had helped to nurture. As the crowd continued to marvel at the mural, Gregory felt a tug on his sleeve. He looked down to see a young girl, no more than 7 or 8 years old, gazing up at him with wide eyes. "Mr. Cole," she said, her voice barely above a whisper, Do you think I could make something like that someday?" Gregory knelt down to her level, his heart swelling with emotion. "Of course you can, sweetheart. In fact, I'm certain of it. All you need is the courage to dream, and the determination to make those dreams a reality. The girl's face broke into a radiant smile, and she threw her arms around Gregory's neck in a spontaneous hug before darting off to rejoin her friends. As Gregory straightened up, he caught Eleanor's eye. She was watching him with a look of pure joy and pride. "You see, Gregory?" she said softly as he came to stand beside her chair. "This is what it's all about. Not the money, not the power, but this: touching lives, inspiring dreams, building a community where everyone has the chance to shine." Gregory nodded, too overwhelmed to speak. He placed a hand on Eleanor's shoulder, and together they turned back to admire the mural, this beautiful symbol of all they had accomplished together. As the sun began to set, casting a golden glow over the gathering, Gregory Cole stood tall, surrounded by the community he had come to love. He was no longer the cold, calculating businessman of years past, but a man transformed by compassion, purpose, and the enduring power of human connection. And as the stars began to twinkle in the darkening sky, Gregory knew with absolute certainty that this moment, this place, these people, was where he truly belonged. This was home. This was wealth beyond measure. This was the life he was always meant to live. The unveiling of the mural marked a new chapter, not just for the community center, but for Gregory himself. As he stood there, basking in the warm glow of community spirit, he felt a renewed sense of purpose washing over him. The journey that had begun with a simple act of compassion, sparing Eleanor from eviction, had led him to this moment, and he knew that there were still many more adventures to come. In the days and weeks that followed, Gregory found himself busier than ever, but in the most fulfilling way possible. The success of the creative arts program and the impact of the mural had sparked a wave of interest from other communities across the country. Requests for similar programs began pouring in, and Gregory knew that this was an opportunity to spread the positive change even further. One crisp morning, as Gregory sat in his office reviewing proposals for new community initiatives, Julia knocked on his door with an excited gleam in her eye. "Gregory, you're not going to believe this," she said, barely containing her enthusiasm. "Remember that small town in the Midwest where we piloted the homelessness prevention program? Well, their mayor just called. The program has been so successful that they've effectively eliminated chronic homelessness in their community. They want us to come and see the results for ourselves." Gregory leaned back in his chair, a slow smile spreading across his face. This was the kind of news that made all the long hours and hard work worthwhile. "That's incredible, Julia. Let's make it happen. In fact, why don't we turn this into a larger fact-finding mission? We could visit several communities where we've implemented programs, see what's working, what could be improved." Julia nodded, already tapping away on her tablet. "I love it. We could create a comprehensive report, use it to refine our existing programs and develop new ones. Oh, and Gregory? The mayor mentioned something else. They want to present you with a key to the city." Gregory chuckled, shaking his head. "That's very kind of them, but you know how I feel about those sorts of honors. This isn't about me, it's about the community." "I had a feeling you'd say that," Julia said with a knowing smile. "Which is why I took the liberty of suggesting an alternative. Instead of presenting you with a key, they're going to use the funds they would have spent on the ceremony to establish a scholarship fund for local students interested in community development and social work." Gregory's eyes lit up. "Now that's more like it. Julia, you're a genius." As Julia left to make the necessary arrangements, Gregory turned to look out his office window. The view had changed so much over the years, both literally and figuratively. Where once he had seen only potential profit margins and development opportunities, he now saw a vibrant, thriving community. Each building, each tree, each person on the street below was a testament to the power of compassion and collective effort. His gaze fell on the community center, the newly unveiled mural clearly visible even from this distance. He thought about Michael, the young artist whose talent might never have been discovered without the programs they had put in place. He thought about the little girl who had asked if she could create something like that someday. He thought about Eleanor, whose wisdom and kindness had set this all in motion. A knock at the door interrupted his reverie. It was Michael, looking slightly nervous but excited. "Mr. Cole, do you have a moment?" Gregory smiled warmly, gesturing for Michael to come in. "Of course, Michael. What can I do for you?" Michael took a deep breath, then launched into an impassioned speech. "Sir, I've been thinking a lot about what you told me, about using my art to make a difference. And I have an idea. I want to start an art therapy program for at-risk youth. I've been doing some research, and the results of art therapy in helping kids deal with trauma and express themselves are really promising. I thought maybe the foundation could help me get it off the ground." Gregory listened intently, his heart swelling with pride. This was exactly the kind of initiative he had hoped to inspire. Young people taking the lead, using their talents to uplift others. "Michael, that's a wonderful idea," Gregory said, leaning forward in his chair. "In fact, I think it could tie in perfectly with our homelessness prevention program. Many of the families we work with have children who've experienced significant trauma. Your program could be an invaluable resource." Michael's face lit up. "Really? You think it could work?" Gregory nodded, already reaching for his phone. "I know it can. Let's set up a meeting with the program directors and start hammering out the details. I have a feeling this is going to be something truly special." As Michael left the office, practically bouncing with excitement, Gregory felt a familiar warmth in his chest. This was why he did what he did: to create opportunities, to inspire others to make a difference, to keep the cycle of positive change going. He glanced at the clock and realized it was nearly time for his daily visit with Eleanor. No matter how busy things got, he always made time for these visits. Eleanor's wisdom and perspective were as valuable to him now as they had ever been. As he made his way to Eleanor's apartment, Gregory reflected on the journey that had brought him here. From a cold-hearted businessman focused only on profit, to a community leader dedicated to making a positive impact. It had been a profound transformation, one that had enriched his life in ways he could never have imagined. Eleanor was waiting for him, as always, with a pot of tea and a plate of cookies. Despite her advancing years, her mind remained as sharp as ever, and her spirit as kind and generous as the day they'd met. "So, my dear," Eleanor said as Gregory settled into his usual chair, "tell me about your day. What new adventures are you embarking on now?" Gregory smiled, feeling the familiar sense of peace that always came over him in Eleanor's presence. As he began to share the day's events, Michael's art therapy proposal, the success of the homelessness prevention program, the upcoming fact-finding mission, he was struck once again by how fortunate he was. Here he was, sitting in the very apartment he had once sought to take away, with the woman who had changed the course of his life. The ruthless tycoon he had once been would never have imagined this future, a future filled with purpose, compassion, and genuine human connection. As the afternoon light filtered through the windows, casting a warm glow over the room, Gregory Cole knew with absolute certainty that he was exactly where he was meant to be. The journey wasn't over. There would always be more work to do, more lives to touch, more positive change to create. But with Eleanor's wisdom to guide him, his dedicated team by his side, and a community that had become his family, Gregory was ready for whatever challenges lay ahead. For in the end, he had discovered the greatest truth of all, that true wealth isn't measured in dollars and cents, but in the lives we touch and the love we share. And by that measure, Gregory Cole was the richest man in the world. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across Eleanor's cozy living room, Gregory found himself lost in thought. The comfortable silence between them was a testament to their years of friendship, a bond that had weathered storms and celebrated triumphs. Eleanor, ever perceptive, noticed the pensive look on Gregory's face. "A penny for your thoughts, dear," she said softly, her eyes twinkling with curiosity. Gregory smiled, shaking his head slightly as if to clear away the cobwebs of his musings. "I was just thinking about how far we've come, Eleanor. How different things could have been if I hadn't met you that day. If I had gone through with the eviction." Eleanor reached out and patted his hand gently. "But you didn't, Gregory. That's what matters. You chose compassion, even when it wasn't easy. And look at all the good that has come from that one decision." Gregory nodded, feeling a lump form in his throat. "I owe you so much, Eleanor. You changed my life." Eleanor chuckled softly. Oh, my dear boy, I may have opened the door, but you're the one who walked through it. You're the one who chose to change, to grow, to use your resources for good. Give yourself some credit. As Gregory pondered her words, a thought struck him. Eleanor, he said slowly, I want to do something to honor you, to ensure that your legacy lives on long after we're both gone. Eleanor raised an eyebrow, a mix of curiosity and amusement on her face. Oh, and what did you have in mind? Gregory leaned forward, his eyes alight with excitement. A scholarship program. No, more than that. A mentorship program. We'll call it the Eleanor Thompson Fellowship. It'll be for young people who want to make a difference in their communities, who have big dreams, but maybe not the resources to achieve them. We'll provide them with education, guidance, and the support they need to become the next generation of community leaders. As Gregory spoke, Eleanor's eyes filled with tears. She reached out and clasped his hand tightly. Oh, Gregory, that's wonderful. But you don't have to do this for me. Gregory shook his head firmly. I want to, Eleanor. It's the least I can do to honor everything you've done for me, for this community. Your wisdom, your compassion, they should be passed on to future generations. Eleanor nodded, too overcome with emotion to speak. After a moment, she composed herself and said, Well then, if we're going to do this, we'd better do it right. I have some ideas. For the next few hours, Gregory and Eleanor brainstormed, their excitement growing with each passing minute. They discussed criteria for selecting fellows, potential partnerships with universities and community organizations, and ways to ensure that the program would have a lasting impact. As the clock struck 9, Gregory reluctantly stood to leave. I should go, he said, but I'll be back tomorrow. We have a lot of work to do to get this fellowship off the ground. Eleanor smiled up at him, her eyes shining with pride and affection. We certainly do. And Gregory, thank you. Not just for this, but for everything. You've made an old woman very proud. Gregory bent down and kissed her cheek gently. Thank you, Eleanor, for everything. As he walked home that night, Gregory felt a renewed sense of purpose. The Eleanor Thompson Fellowship would be his most ambitious project yet, but he knew it had the potential to create ripples of positive change that would extend far beyond their community. The next few months were a whirlwind of activity. Gregory threw himself into the development of the fellowship program with the same intensity he had once applied to his business dealings. But this time, the goal wasn't to increase his own wealth or power. It was to create opportunities for others, to nurture the next generation of compassionate leaders. Julia, as always, was by his side every step of the way, her organizational skills and dedication proving invaluable. Together, they assembled a team of educators, community leaders, and social workers to help shape the program. Michael, the young artist whose talent had blossomed under the Foundation's programs, was invited to join the planning committee. His perspective as someone who had benefited from similar initiatives proved invaluable in ensuring that the fellowship would truly meet the needs of its recipients. As word of the Eleanor Thompson Fellowship spread, applications began pouring in from all over the country. Young people with dreams of making a difference in their communities, dreams of creating affordable housing, of developing sustainable urban farming initiatives, of establishing mental health programs for underserved populations. Reading through these applications, Gregory felt a sense of hope and excitement he hadn't experienced in years. These young people, with their passion and their vision, represented the future he had been working towards all along. The day finally came to announce the first cohort of Eleanor Thompson Fellows. Gregory insisted that the ceremony be held at the community center, in front of the mural that had come to symbolize their collective journey. As he stood before the gathered crowd, a sea of faces representing every age, race, and background, Gregory felt a profound sense of gratitude. He saw Eleanor in the front row, her eyes shining with pride. Julia stood to his right, clipboard in hand as always, but with a smile that spoke of more than just professional satisfaction. Michael was there too, standing with a group of young artists who had contributed to the mural. Ladies and gentlemen, Gregory began, his voice ringing out clear and strong. Today marks not an ending, but a beginning. The Eleanor Thompson Fellowship is more than just a scholarship program. It's a promise to nurture the seeds of compassion, to cultivate leadership, and to create a future where every community can thrive. As he spoke, Gregory couldn't help but reflect on his own journey. From a man who saw the world only in terms of profit and loss, to someone who understood the true value of community, of connection, of using one's resources to uplift others. Each of the young people we're honoring today, he continued, represents the best of what humanity has to offer. They have looked at their communities not with despair, but with hope. They have seen challenges not as obstacles, but as opportunities for growth and change. Gregory paused, his gaze sweeping over the audience. But they are not alone in this journey. Each of us here today, whether we're a fellow, a mentor, a community member, we all have a role to play in creating the world we want to see. The Eleanor Thompson Fellowship is named after a woman who taught me the true meaning of wealth, that it lies not in what we accumulate for ourselves, but in what we give to others. As Gregory called each fellow up to the stage, presenting them with their certificate and a warm handshake, he felt a sense of completion. This, he realized, was what he had been working towards all along, not just to make changes himself, but to inspire and empower others to become agents of change. The ceremony concluded with a standing ovation, the sound of applause echoing through the community center and spilling out into the streets beyond. As the crowd began to disperse, forming small groups to chat and congratulate the new fellows, Gregory made his way to Eleanor. She was beaming, her eyes bright with unshed tears. "Oh, Gregory," she said, reaching out to clasp his hand, "I couldn't be more proud if you were my own son." Gregory felt his own eyes welling up. "In every way that matters, Eleanor, I am your son. Everything good in my life, everything I've accomplished, it all started with you." As they stood there, surrounded by the warmth and energy of the community they had helped to build, Gregory Cole knew that this was just the beginning. There would be challenges ahead, new problems to solve, new lives to touch. But with the lessons Eleanor had taught him, with the support of his team and the inspiration of the young fellows, he was ready to face whatever the future might bring. For Gregory had learned the most valuable lesson of all, that true fulfillment comes not from what we gain for ourselves, but from what we give to others. And in giving, he had received more than he ever could have imagined. As the sun began to set, casting a golden glow over the community center and the faces of those gathered there, Gregory Cole stood tall, his heart full of gratitude, hope, and an unshakable commitment to continue the work of making the world a better place, one act of compassion at a time. The story of Gregory Cole, from ruthless tycoon to compassionate community leader, would be told for generations to come. But for Gregory himself, the greatest story was the one still being written, in the lives touched, the communities transformed, and the ripples of positive change that would continue long after he was gone. And as he looked out at the faces of the Eleanor Thompson Fellows, their eyes shining with the promise of the future they would help to create, Gregory knew that his journey, their journey, was far from over. It was, in fact, only just beginning. The weeks and months that followed the inauguration of the Eleanor Thompson Fellowship were a whirlwind of activity. Gregory found himself energized in a way he hadn't experienced since the early days of his business career. But this time, the energy came from a place of purpose and compassion rather than greed and ambition. Each day brought new challenges and opportunities. Gregory worked tirelessly alongside the fellows, mentoring them, connecting them with resources, and sometimes simply listening as they shared their dreams and fears. He was continually amazed by their creativity, their resilience, and their unwavering commitment to making a difference. One crisp autumn morning, as Gregory sat in his office reviewing proposals from the fellows, Julia knocked on his door with an intriguing gleam in her eye. "Gregory," she said, barely containing her excitement, "I think you need to see this." She handed him a tablet, open to a news article. The headline read, "From Ruthless to Righteous, the Gregory Cole story goes viral." Gregory's eyebrows shot up in surprise as he began to read. The article detailed his transformation from cold-hearted businessman to community champion, highlighting the impact of his work and the ripple effect it was having across the country. It seemed that word of the Eleanor Thompson Fellowship had spread far beyond their local community, inspiring similar initiatives in cities across the nation. As he read, Gregory felt a mix of emotions wash over him: pride in what they had accomplished, humility in the face of such recognition, and a touch of discomfort at being in the spotlight. But most of all, he felt a renewed sense of responsibility. "Julia," he said, looking up from the tablet, "I think it's time we took this to the next level." Julia nodded, a knowing smile on her face. "I had a feeling you'd say that. What did you have in mind?" Over the next few hours, Gregory and Julia brainstormed ideas for expanding their impact. They discussed creating a national network of community development programs, leveraging technology to connect changemakers across the country, and even exploring international partnerships. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across Gregory's office, he leaned back in his chair, feeling both exhausted and exhilarated. "You know, Julia," he said softly, "there was a time when I thought I had it all figured out. I thought success was about accumulating wealth, about being the biggest and the best. But now," Julia finished his thought for him, "now you know that true success is about making a difference." Gregory nodded, a warm smile spreading across his face. "Exactly, and we're just getting started." That evening, as Gregory made his way to Eleanor's apartment for their daily visit, he felt a spring in his step that belied his years. The crisp autumn air filled his lungs, carrying with it the scent of possibilities. Eleanor was waiting for him as always, with a pot of tea and a plate of cookies. But tonight, there was something different about her, a spark in her eye, an energy that seemed to radiate from her very being. "Gregory, my dear," she said as he settled into his usual chair, "I've been thinking." Gregory leaned forward, intrigued. When Eleanor had that look in her eye, it usually meant she had come up with something brilliant. "I've been watching you work with these young fellows," she continued, "and it's made me realize something. We've been focusing so much on the future, on nurturing the next generation of leaders. And that's wonderful, it truly is. But what about the wisdom of the past?" Gregory tilted his head, curious. "What do you mean, Eleanor?" Eleanor's eyes twinkled as she explained her idea. She proposed creating a program that would pair retired professionals with the Eleanor Thompson Fellows. These seniors, with their wealth of experience and knowledge, could serve as mentors and advisors to the young changemakers. "Think about it, Gregory," Eleanor said, her voice filled with excitement. "We could call it the Bridge of Wisdom program. It would not only provide valuable guidance to the fellows, but also give purpose and meaning to seniors who might otherwise feel sidelined by society." As Eleanor spoke, Gregory felt a familiar thrill run through him. This was why he valued these visits so much. Eleanor's perspective, her ability to see connections and possibilities where others might not, never ceased to amaze him. "Eleanor," he said, reaching out to clasp her hand, "you've done it again. This is exactly what we need to take the fellowship to the next level." Over the next few hours, they fleshed out the details of the Bridge of Wisdom program. By the time Gregory left that evening, they had a solid plan in place, ready to be implemented. The following weeks were a blur of activity as Gregory, Julia, and their team worked to bring the Bridge of Wisdom program to life. They reached out to retirement communities, professional associations, and senior centers, spreading the word about this unique opportunity. The response was overwhelming. Retired teachers, engineers, social workers, and business leaders all stepped forward, eager to share their knowledge and experience with the next generation of community leaders. On the day of the first Bridge of Wisdom meeting, Gregory stood at the back of the community center, watching with pride as the room filled with a mix of eager young fellows and seasoned professionals. The energy in the room was palpable, a blend of youthful enthusiasm and hard-earned wisdom. As he observed the interactions, Gregory saw connections being forged, ideas being exchanged, and a new kind of understanding developing between generations. He watched as a retired urban planner bent over a set of blueprints with a young fellow passionate about sustainable housing. Nearby, a former social worker engaged in an animated discussion with a group of fellows interested in mental health initiatives. In that moment, Gregory felt a profound sense of fulfillment. This, he realized, was the true legacy of his work: not just the changes he had made himself, but the ripples of change he had set in motion, ripples that would continue long after he was gone. As the meeting drew to a close, Gregory made his way to the front of the room. The chatter died down as all eyes turned to him. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, his voice filled with emotion. "What I've witnessed here today gives me more hope for the future than I've ever had before. Each of you, whether you're a fellow just starting out on your journey or a mentor with a lifetime of experience to share, you are the embodiment of what we can achieve when we come together, when we bridge the gaps between us and work towards a common goal." He paused, looking out at the sea of faces before him. "The challenges we face as a society are great, but standing here, seeing the connections you've forged, the ideas you've shared, I have no doubt that together we can overcome anything." As applause filled the room, Gregory felt a hand on his shoulder. He turned to see Eleanor, who had insisted on attending despite her advancing years. "You've done it, Gregory," she said softly, her eyes shining with pride. "You've created something truly beautiful here." Gregory shook his head, smiling. "No, Eleanor, we've done it. All of us. Together." As they stood there, surrounded by the buzz of excited conversation and the promise of new beginnings, Gregory Cole knew that this was just another step on their journey. There would be more challenges to face, more lives to touch, more positive change to create. But with the wisdom of the past and the energy of the future coming together in harmony, he was more certain than ever that they were on the right path. The path of compassion, of community, of using one's resources not for personal gain, but for the betterment of all. And as the sun set on another day of possibility and promise, Gregory Cole looked to the future with hope, knowing that the greatest chapters of their story were yet to be written.